Biology Chapter 18 Theory Video 1 Biodiversity Classification and Conservation is what we are going to discuss about. So there are a lot of words that you need to, or definitions that you need to understand and by heart. So these are going to be quite important and will be questioned you on the theories and how well you remember the definitions that they have given in the book. So classification, obviously you know what classification is. Classification is the separation of different kinds of animals into similar groups so that we can understand about them and we can learn about them easily. So the diversity of different species and the diversity of different animals is actually studied in this. So the diversity is the kind of the different types of all the species living on this planet. That is actually the basis of all the different kinds of animals, plants and microbes who live on planet Earth. Now, when we discuss about the species, species is classified as a similar group of or similar organisms that appear that are present in a certain a geographical area, but that doesn't actually limit that is not limited to that geographical area, but that is actually what was the theory behind the species at the beginning. But now we know that the human species is found everywhere in the not only in one geographical area, but in all the geographical areas on the planet we can see them, except in water. So that geographical area, the main different geographical areas, we cannot find them. That is, human beings cannot live in water. So that was actually the history of it. But now we learn about species. A species is categorized as a mean group of organisms that appear similar to each other, and they have the ability to breed together successfully to produce fertile offspring. So this this is a general requirement. However, this appearing similar to each other is not quite. It is not definitely a hard and fast rule, because there are some animals whose male and female, they belong to the same species, but their males and females are quite different from one another, and their sizes would be different. There are a lot of things that might be different between them. So that is also, but even though that they have those differences, that doesn't mean they belong to a different species. So this species, the animals, or animals, plants, or whoever it is, a mean group of organisms that appear similar to each other and have the ability to reproduce and produce fertile offspring. So this is the term. This is a term that we refer to as a biological species concept. That is in other words, it is biospecies concept. So sometimes when we have to introduce many species for the first time, when we have to introduce them, we cannot actually talk about the physical features, because outward appearance and anatomy is not exactly it is not the morphological or the the concept that is we don't talk about the anatomy. So this is this is not the best way of defining a species. So there are different terms that you need to understand. Like I said, morphological species is another term that we need to understand. Then ecological species. So here in ecological species is when we find a population of organisms that share the same features and all live in the same habitat at the same time. So these are different definitions and different ways of presenting a species. There are, most often now we think that there are almost all the species are found. Actually, this could be quite true for many large animals, but still we are still discovering many different kinds of animals. Sometimes some of the geckos or some of the roaches or some of the different insects that you find in your area, you might be looking at an insect on your table or somewhere on the wall or something. Maybe this insect has never been found before. Maybe you are the only person to lay eyes on that species for the first time. Maybe it has never been seen by anyone else. This is the first time you are seeing that, but you are not thoroughly familiar with the different types of insects. So as a result, you might not be able to identify it as a new species or previously unidentified species. So but still the scientists who are familiar with this concept and who are familiar with these insects and all, so they carry out these different tests to identify who these species are, and they name them. So they might be able to, if you actually find a new species, you will be able to name it after you. So these are actually things which are happening all the time. Now, in 18th century, a Swedish scientist known as Carolus Linnaeus introduced the scientific naming system that is known as the binomial naming system, to identify different animals. The first name of that binomial means there are two names. The first name is the genus or the generic name. So that is a rank higher than the species in the classification system. So there are different species who show many similarities and who are closely related are in this genus category. Now, for example, Homo sapiens. Now you know about the different kind of other species who have been there before. Homo erectus, Homo habilis, those kind of animals. We are also animals, so they are in the Homo category. The second name is going to be specific. We call it specific epithet or trivial name. The generic name is one word. Now, for example, Nesomimus, the species name is both words. So we take this, we take them together to give you the species name. Nesimumus trifasciatus. Nesimumus trifasciatus is one species within the genus Nesomimus. Inside the Nesomimus generic name, there are many different species. One of them is Nesimumus trifasciatus. So these are different types of mockingbird species of the Galapagos. So I have mentioned it to you earlier about Galapagos Islands, where the father of human evolution, Charles Darwin, carried out his experimentations and developed his theory. So if you and also if you have named it before, now for example Homo sapiens, if you have to repeat the word, if you have mentioned Homo sapiens when you are writing the answer, you can actually shorten it to H.sapiens. So that is something that abbreviation is something that you can do when you are explaining a lot of things. However, please make sure that the specific epithet, that is the in this particular situation, Nesomimus trifasciatus, So if you want to name it later on again, then you can say N dot trifasciatus. So if you feel that there are and also if there are two species that you're talking about using the same abbreviation, right? So that is, if it is starting other than Homo sapiens, let's say you have some other species H dot something, then you might want to use the name in full. Always give the name in full if they are asking for the type of species. Now so obviously we don't know how many species are there on Earth. We have described, humanity has described more than 1.5 million species. So these are species, and they have been named. So we estimate the total number of species on planet Earth is about 100 million species. So we have named 1.5 million species of animals. So we are yet to name 89.5 98.5 million species are yet to be named. But this actually does not include the plants, so that is also a different aspect of that. But still, we are yet to name about 90 million different types of animals and plants together. So you can understand the magnitude of how many animals are there on planet Earth. Write down a note on this, please. Classification. Species is generally identified. A species is generally identified as a mean group of organisms that appear similar to each other and who can breed together successfully to produce fertile offspring. Leave a line and write. Based on this general description, we identify species in three different forms. Number one, biological species. Put a dash and write. A group of organisms with similar morphology and physiology, which can breed together to produce fertile offspring and are reproductively isolated from other species. Number two, morphological species. A group of organisms that share many physical features that distinguish them from other species. Number three, ecological species. A population of individuals on the same species living in the same area at the same time. Then we need to understand what a population is. Population is all of the organisms of the same species present in the same place and at the same time that can interbreed with one another. That is the population. I hope you understood. If you have any questions, please ask. Now we are going to go into the hierarchical classification. We have so many different kinds of organisms living on Earth, so we cannot identify now. Even if we are to study about this 1.5 million species that we have already identified, it is not going to be easy for us to to study them, because they are of so many different kinds. So what we do is we group them into different categories so that it is easier for us to understand them. So the classification is only a process where we identify them in such a way that it is easy for us to understand. Right now, if you take different animals and plants, we can categorize them into different groups. Now here, if you go to the classification of African bush elephant, so this is the classification that we have for the fellow. Now, if you take the domain, they are eukarya. Eukarya means eukaryotic. You learned about eukaryotic organisms. Eukaryotic organisms have a developed cell nucleus. So they belong to the African bush elephant belongs to domain eukarya. Then the kingdom is Animalia. They belong to kingdom Animalia. The phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Proboscidea, then family Elephantidae, then genus Loxodonta. The species is Loxodonta africana. So that is the species of the African bush elephant. So the genus is Loxodonta. Now you can actually understand that the Asian elephant should belong to Loxodonta category, the family Elephantidae. So there should be a relationship between these two. So we will know that beyond the family Elephantidae, so the African elephant and the Asian elephants, both of them would be found. So in the class Mammalia, we are also mammals. So we are also related to elephants in different ways. Now you can see we are similar to plants only at the first instance. At this point in the domain, we are similar because it is eukarya. We both belong to eukaryotic individuals. So we are both eukarya, but kingdom, the plants deviate from us to become to belong to kingdom Plantae. We are in kingdom Animalia. So this is the relationship, or this is the basis of hierarchical classification. So then there is something called taxonomy that you need to understand. Taxonomy is the study and practice of naming and classifying species and groups of species within the hierarchical classification scheme. Right? So taxa is actually the practice of putting them in an order. So this is when we discuss about biological classification, these taxa will form a hierarchy. We categorize them to its own species, and the similar species will be grouped into a genus or genera. Then similar genera will be grouped into a family, families into order, orders into class, classes into phylum. We are going up. Then phylum into the different phyla will get together to produce kingdom, and domain is the highest taxonomic rank in the hierarchical classification system. So you have now understood what they all belong, what is meant by that. Let's write down a note on this, please. Hierarchical classification. To identify the millions of different types of species, we have a system of organization where we group the living and extinct organisms based on similarities and differences between them. This is known as biological classification. Leave a line and write. The study and practice of naming and classifying species and groups of species within the hierarchical classification scheme is known as taxonomy. Leave a line, put a star and write down. This is the most important point here. Hierarchical classification the arrangement of organisms into groups of different rank, where the lowest rank is the species and the highest rank being the domain. Right, so now I would suggest that you write down this chart here, 18.1 chart, so that you can see the classification of African bush elephant and hibiscus plants. That is the Vadamala, Vada. So that is something that you can understand. The hibiscus plants belong to domain Eukarya, then the kingdom Plantae, phylum Angiospermae, class Dicotyledoninae. Now these are the terms that you have learned. Order Malvaceae, then family Malvaceae, then genus Hibiscus and species Hibiscus Rosa sinensis. Rosa sinensis. So these are this is the way how these plants and animals are classified. So you would be able to understand and you would be able to identify if they are related by using these classification methods. Please write down this table so that you can understand it better. If you have any questions, please ask.